Welcome everybody, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and let's just dive right into today's project because I'm kind of wired because it's 10 p.m. and I'm drinking coffee for some reason. I don't know why, but what we're working on today is combining several things that are kind of awesome with this channel, and that would be Blender, that's Blender 2.8 in front of you right here, some 3D printing, we'll get to that in a moment, and Battletech, because we're making some 6mm scale modern looking apartments for games like Battletech, a game of armored combat, or Battletech Alpha Strike. Now, what you see in front of you here is kind of my demo project I set up to figure this whole thing out. So, in the end, we'll have something that looks kind of like this, not exact, but let's just start building and see where things go. So, whereas this guy's kind of in one piece, my project's going to be in, I think, about 5 different pieces. That way, in theory, you should be able to print this without support. Alright, I'm going to jump into top view here. And if you're not already in orthographic view, press 5 in the numpad to get there. I am. And I'm going to get adventurous and add 3 cubes. So this guy over here, this is going to become the side of the apartment building. This guy here is going to become the middle hallway. It's going to be kind of like a nice glass mirrored thing. Well, that's the idea behind it. Of course, you have to paint it up that way. And this guy over here, this is going to be our scale human. So let me jump to my front view and our scale human. I'm just going to call him over here scale human. Over in the object domain. And now, right off the bat, I'm actually going to be working in about 1/10 scale. I don't like to model my 3D printed objects in Blender in full scale. At least in previous versions, you could kind of choke and die a little bit in terms of camera clipping. I don't know if 2.8 has that problem, but let's not find out. So for the scale human over here, what I'm going to be doing is giving it an X and Y of 0.2 millimeters and then 0.6 millimeters for a Z. So it's going to be really small, but this is basically like a 1/10 scale human model. And we're going to use this to size up our building. I'm going to go back over here to this block, and we're going to call this apartment side. And then jump back to our top view. And let's dive into edit mode. And by the way, over here in the corner, those are all the keys I'm pressing in case you were curious. Do you really need to have wheel up ×4? Come on. There's probably an option for that where I don't need to have it show that. But regardless, let's jump over to a wireframe. And what I want to do is kind of create that weird modern look. So I'm going to do a radial cut. Control R and kind of position it so you see it going in the middle here. And then move my mouse wheel about 4 times, which it actually doesn't show this time, oddly enough. And I think that will work pretty good. And we're going to left click. Whoops. Left click there. And now, oh, sorry, loop cut. It's called loop cut, not radial cut. Loop cut. I'm going to start manipulating some vertices to give it that kind of cool angled look to the side of an apartment building. One restriction is, on this side over here, you want to make sure that nothing sticks out above or below any points on this side. So basically, your tallest side of the building, you want to be here. This is going to be used for the alignment purposes when it comes to 3D printing it and avoiding support materials. So I'm going to do 2 more loop cuts like that. And let me scale them so they're like something like that. And then what that's going to let me do, move that in. And now, if I switch back to solid mode, you get something that kind of looks like, you know, a weird looking modern apartment building, you know, because it's got weird angles. That looks pretty good for now. Now to figure out how tall you want it to be, I'm going to go find our scale human over here. And just bring him next to this. Now I think what I'll do is make like a 6th floor size structure. So maybe a floor of an apartment in this case. This is your average size human-ish. Maybe technically a little short because it's 6mm only in eye height. It's weird. I don't know why they did it. Let's bring out a calculator. 0.6 times about 1.7. So that might be a height times 6. It should be about 6.12. So let's do 7. So that's probably a little bit better for a 6th floor building. I like that idea. Okay. Now what I want to do is work on building the middle corridor, or I guess it's kind of like it'd be a staircase or elevator that's mostly like a glass like building. So let's bring this guy over towards our side here. And this is actually going to be built in two pieces itself. So we have, this is going to represent one half of the corridor, and then there's going to be another basically equal other half over here. So let me size this down to what I think it should be. Once again, I kind of use my human as a reference. That's probably pretty good. Now what I want to do is make this a little bit less than half this length, just to get a little bit of stylized thing going on. So y is 3.62. So let's divide that by 2 and then knock a little bit off. So let's do 1.4. Now let's do a little smaller, 1.3. I think that'll look pretty good for kind of the hallway. Maybe make it a little bit wider. That'll work. Now what I want to do, let's see, we're going to make it the same height as this piece of the building. So let's see, this one was 7. As long as it's approximately close, you're good for right now. And what I want to do is give this thing then a pattern of windows. It doesn't have to be, one window per floor. There could be, really giant windows. So for that, we're going to jump into edit mode, and we're going to do some loop cuts. I want to call them radial cuts. I don't know. Maybe they used to be called that. I don't really remember. I want 3. You'll see why I want 3 here in a minute. And now I want to scale them apart. So these two edges on the sides there, they're going to become kind of the window frames. So something like that will look pretty good, I think. So I got to figure out a bunch of smaller frames for the windows. Oh, we could just we go to town here, couldn't we? So there you go. Now we've got a whole bunch of faces to this particular mesh. And we're going to turn this into a window pattern. So I'm going to go up to my face select mode up here in the upper left hand corner. Let's deselect all of that. And now I'm actually going to jump back to solid mode. The reason I'm doing that is I only want to select the faces that are on the front of the building. So let me select all those. I'll select all those as well. And now what I want to do is, let's see, how many do I have here? Let's count. 1. Okay, so there's 36 faces. All right, 36. 36, that could be 6 equal panes. Why not? That could look kind of cool. So each pane then has to be consistent of 6 things. So I need the bottom and the top one for sure. So let me start by alternating, selecting 5 from the top and 5 from the bottom. This really shouldn't be that hard. Hey, that worked out. Awesome. So I've got now a whole bunch of equal panes here selected. And we're going to turn these things in the middle here basically into windows. So, whoopsie daisy. Well, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay. Anyway, let's switch back to wireframe and deselect everything that's not in the front. And then I want to zoom in. Let's just press extrude and move out a little bit. So if we jump back to our solid mode, now you can see here all those window structures are now just sticking out a little bit. So that's how you can kind of get the illusion that there's windows in there, and these are kind of the frame of a window, right? Nothing too fancy. All right, so that piece is done. Let me call this one building core. Then I want to make a duplicate of this. I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. That's rotating around the z-axis. Every time I go to this view, my giant apartment building gets in the way. So you kind of get an idea of how this is going to start to look. Something like that. Okay, so that's kind of cool like that, I think. You know what I want to do? I want to actually make these stick out a little bit more. So let me do that. So that means I just got to make these, oopsie daisy, undo that. So I just got to bring these back a little bit so that they meet with each other. All right, I think that's going to look pretty good for the core of the building. Now what I want to do is add some ribs around the sides of the building. Whoa. That's kind of the scale the thing's going to end up at being. But I want to add some little fancy ribs, maybe some trim around the sides of the building, make it look a little bit nicer. So for that, let's jump back to our apartment side. And what I want to do is duplicate this thing, and then I'm going to move it up to the top. I'm going to scale along the z-axis till it's pretty small. 0.12. Do a z of 0.12. The reason now why I'm doing a z of 0.12 is this is going to be laying down horizontally. So you can kind of think of it as basically this would be the front of your print bed, the back of your print bed, bottom, and top. And I'm assuming you're working with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, which is the most common nozzle for FDM 3D printers. And that means this piece here would end up being basically 3 passes of the nozzle wide, which is probably about as small as you want to get, unless you want to really get adventurous. But we'll come back to that in a minute. What I want to do now is actually scale it to make it a little bit bigger than the building itself. Not a lot. Something like that. So that way it's going to stick out about 1 centimeter or 2. And I want to line it up with the side of the building. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't flatten this edge. I'll do that in just a moment. And then once again, let me go back over here and make this 0.12. So let me flatten the edges of the building. So here's how you do that. Now this is along the x-axis. So S for scale, X for x-axis, 0. You probably didn't notice much because there wasn't going to be much of a change. But now all these points are lined up along the one axis. That was a little tip one of the viewers of the show gave me a while back. I was like, holy crap, that's amazing. That was like one of the coolest Blender things that I've ever discovered. Well, not discovered, someone told me. I did not discover it. So let me just line those things up. So now, if I go back to our solid mode and I drag this kind of down in place, you can start to see how that ribbing of the structure is going to end up coming into play. What I'll do, since it's going to be a 6th floor building, I think I said. Sounds right. And I ended up making this be 6 floors. Ironically. I'm going to line up a rib with each of these middle spars here. So let me just drop down like that. Let's go to wireframe mode. We'll start there. We can line up the first one. So over here in the modifiers context, we want to click on the little wrench. Let's choose array. For relative offset, I'm going to choose 0 for the X. Let's try just a number for Z, and let me see how that looks. That's a little bit too small because we want to align this guy up with this line up here. So let's just keep punching in numbers. It's within the ballpark. Let's do like 8.2. Nah, that's probably too much. 8.1. Let's run with 8.1. And I need, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more of those. So for count, let's do 5. 5 total. Sorry. So this is the total number. I need 6. Because this includes the original one over here. And now that should, if I go up here, still be on target. If it's not, you can always adjust your Z spacing a little bit, but that looks pretty good to me. So there's our rib starting to form around the building. Looking at our monster building over here, what I'm probably going to do is add some trim to it, which means there's little things that stick out to add a little bit of extra detail and flair to the side of the building. I could go ahead and put balconies in here if you want to get fancy. The problem with the balconies is unless you're doing some advanced supports, you're probably going to run into a situation where your 3D printer can't print them without supports. So it's probably better not to put them in unless, like I said, you want to really deal with some supports or just get kind of adventurous and not worry about supports. And it might work. It could be a battle damage building, you don't care. So, but I'm going to leave them off just because that adds a lot of complexity to the build process. So what I think I'm going to do is just add some ribs to kind of run along each of these core vertical lines a structure has. And for that, that's just going to be a simple cube. And I'm just going to drag and scale it down to what I think would be a good width and height for the rib. And I can rotate it into place. Something like that would probably be pretty good. Scale along the z-axis. And then scale it down to the proper size of the building, or just punch in the number, because that's the right way to do it. So I just took the Z height from the side of the building and I punched it in here. And then just more or less align up as best you can. There you go, just like that. So now I've got one like there. Just make sure it's fully embedded within the main piece. Basically, it's not kind of just floating off by itself. Yeah, that's fine. I think I'll roll with that. I like that. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but put it at all the other major points. Now there's not a whole lot left to do. This is, like I said, this is a very simple build for Blender. First things we want to do is merge this side of the building into one piece. So let's start with our array modifier. We need to apply that. Then just select everything over here. Don't select your either your middle pieces. So like what I just did there, don't do that. If you do, just deselect them. Come on, you piece of, damn it. If we go to wireframe, we should only have the side of the building selected. Let me just Control J that to join it all into one object. And then what I want to do is mirror it over here. So I don't want to rotate it, I got to mirror it. So let me duplicate it and then Control MX to mirror it. And that's more or less what the final building is going to look like, minus a few more details here, most importantly the roof. This should be fairly simple to do. So let's start by building the roof, and for that what I'm going to do is duplicate one of the two sides of the building. I'm going to go into edit mode, and I want to select a single vertex. I want to select a single vertex on one of the ribs. Island select, Control L. Sorry, linked all. I don't know what they call it today. I think it used to be island select. I really do think it used to be called Island Select. But regardless, then press P for separate by selection. And now what you're going to notice is this one little rib up here is all by itself, which is awesome. Then delete the rest of the duplicated thing. And then what I want to do is come down and just grab it down to the top of the building. Then let me duplicate it, mirror it, just like we did with the other side of the tower. And then in wireframe mode, let's line it up correctly. So, at this point, I do need to position all these parts exactly correct. It has to be pretty darn close. It doesn't have to be perfect, just pretty darn close though, right? So when I say perfect, I really mean, you know, within 1/10 of a millimeter. Which sounds really hard to do, but 3D modeling, it really isn't. So now what I need to do is connect these two halves of the roof together. So I'm going to start by selecting both of them. Do Control J to join them into one object. And then I am going to go into edit mode, extrude it out to about the middle. And then do the same thing over here. And try to get these vertices pretty much exactly on top of each other. Like that. Because what you're going to do now is remove doubles. Okay, so it's called remove doubles in version 2.7. Under vertex, we want to choose merge vertices by distance. And then down here, let's see, is it telling me how many is merged so far? It should. Just gradually increase this number. Remove 20 vertices. That sound right? That looks about right. So if things went the way they should, I can select this one vertice, and now it should move as if it's 1 instead of 2, which it does, so awesome. Now the last thing we have to do to clean up the roof is there's a series of internal faces here. We have to remove those, otherwise that may cause your slicer program to get really cranky. So we need to select on these faces that are kind of hidden in the object, that are the result of merging 2 independent objects into one. And in Blender, when selecting faces, every face, when you're in face select mode, has a little dot to it. Just click on the dot to select the face. That's why sometimes if you click over here, nothing's happening, because you're not clicking on the dot of the face. Alright, so press X and choose delete faces. Don't choose vertices, don't choose edge, choose faces. That way the structure will remain, but those faces will be gone. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. So let me increase the height of the roof now. Whoops, that's right, I can't do that. Let's go back to our vertex mode. Let's grab Z, go up a few millimeters like that. And then we want to cut out the roof so it has like a little fence around it per se. In fact, let's actually raise it up a little bit higher, because I think what we'll do is we'll make it into a little bit of like a rooftop swimming pool like the other thing over here has. So I just renamed this guy roof, and now we're going to give it a cutout. What I want to do is move the origin of this object to its center of its mass. It makes certain operations easier for this. Basically, you can see this orange dot down here. That's where Blender thinks the center of the object is, but it's not, right? This is just kind of a mathematical point that Blender uses, where this, obviously, if this was a real object, the center would be somewhere in there. So the reason why you want to do that, right now if I were to scale this object, you can see it scales around that center point, which is kind of screwy. Sometimes you want it, but right now we don't. So what I want to do, go up to Object here, set Origin, Origin to center of mass by surface. There we go. Now it's where it should be. Apparently the volume thing, I don't know. Anyway, regardless, here's why I just did that. Because we're going to cut out the rooftop, right? So we're going to duplicate the roof, move it up. We're going to call this guy Roof Cutout. Or Cutouter. Sure. And now as I scale it down, it's going to scale around the center, effectively leaving you with a bit of a wall that's going to be around the edge of the roof. Now, in situations like this could get a little weird. So what I'm probably going to do is actually modify the geometry a little bit right here. So I'm going to scale them out a little bit, and then let me scale in the Y direction. And that's going to give me just a little bit more control over the size of the wall right there. And I'm going to make something that will look a little bit better and probably work better 3D printing wise. Okay. So now let me go back to our solid view here so you can see what we're dealing with. I don't know why I did that. Actually, let's go back to wireframe. Grab Z. We're going to go all the way down and position this object so that it's a little bit off the floor. Sorry, position this object so it's a little bit off the bottom of the actual roof object. Select Roof. We're going to go to our modifiers context. What did I call it earlier? It's called the context. I called it something different earlier. For add modifier, we want to do Boolean. Operation is difference. And then for the object, we want Roof Cutouter, because, you know, I can't type. And then hit apply. And Blender 2.8 is pretty good at this. So I'm going to hide this guy. And if I go to solid mode, you now have a nice empty roof up there. So I'm going to reduce the size of the walls there. That'll probably look a little bit nicer. Let people get a nice view of the city as it's getting blown up by a Word of Blake nuke. You never know. It's horrible. Horrible, horrible. We're in the Dark Age now, aren't we? I think, yeah, Classic Battletech's moved on to the Dark Age. But, you know, you can always play other eras if you wish. The last thing I want to do is build a little bit of a doorway right here. So that way you kind of see there's a little bit of a front entrance. That's just pretty darn easy. I'm just going to add a new cube and then shape it to make it look like a doorway. Do a few Boolean cutouts, just like what I did with the roof. So let's just zoom through that. And that will look pretty good for our apartment, I think. So what I need to do, the last thing before I print it, is scale this thing up to the proper size. As I mentioned way back at the start, as I mentioned, this is being modeled at about 1/10 the scale it should be. So let me go ahead. I'm going to move my little human out of the way. I am then going to select everything in the building here. So I'm going to choose Apply Scale. This just essentially does some math over here. It's going to make the next step easier. So under Object, I want to choose Apply and then choose Scale. And now, if I click around and everything looked all right, you should see X, Y, and Z are now all 1, 1, 1. That is good. But what I want to do is select everything again, make sure all the pieces are selected. And then I want to bump the scale up to 10 along X, Y, and Z. Of course, it only did it for one of them. All right, repeat the process for all of them. 10, 10, 10. For the most part, since this is going to be something that is printed in pieces, you don't have to worry a whole lot about reassembling things. But the doorway does have to be in the right spot. That is the one thing that is important to go down there. And now I want to make sure that everything is actually the exact size it should be. When we scale things up by 10 times, any little minor changes in the height of the pieces would become much more apparent. So I need to take each of the side pieces here and I need to make sure they are the exact same height as the center column. If they're not, we'll have to fix that. And there are already a few things I think I'm going to have to fix. You can tell the trim is sticking up a bit above the surface, so I need to select all that and do our little scale 0 trick there. And I'll do the same thing along the bottom. And do then the same thing over here. If I zoom in here, see how the trim is just a tiny bit taller than the building? I want to make sure those are all the same height. Now we get to make sure if this guy is 70 and this guy's also 70, let's just make sure the top and bottom are aligned correctly. That's pretty darn close. And the top is also pretty darn close. Awesome. That's looking pretty good, I'd say. So the last thing I need to do is, oh, the door is still not in the right spot, is it? There we go. That looks good. So the door is now in the right spot. Awesome. So I need to break up all these pieces here. So let's drag it over that way. Export each of them into an STL, and then we can print them up. Oh, I forgot to put on my doodads here in the top of the building. So I'm gonna do that. And then we'll export these things as STLs, and we'll show you how to align them on the print bed to hopefully avoid supports. With these guys here, you can build these things using the same techniques I've showed for building the rest of the building. So I'll kind of leave that up to you as a little bit of a challenge you can try. Like I said, it's very, very simple though. So once again, I'm basically doing Boolean operations, doing some extrusion, loop cuts, whatever it may be. It's all the same kind of stuff I've done up to this point. So I'm getting ready to work with Cura here. I have the various pieces imported, not aligned the way I want to align them yet, but it's a bit of a problem. Let's look at the roof. Huh. The roof is kind of filled in, isn't it? So let me show you what's going on there. I'm in layer mode right now. I'm going to jump to solid view. Probably what's going on, see this red thing here? That kind of has to deal with what face is inside and what's outside. It's a 3D math thing, but we really don't want to see that there. So here's how we're going to fix that. Let me jump back to Blender, click on our roof. Let's go into our edit mode, select everything, go up to mesh, choose normals, recalculate outside. And then save the Blender file and re-export this guy. And then when I jump back into Cura, if I refresh the models, See how that goes away? And if I were to do the repair step, that looks a lot better, doesn't it? I'm going to do the same thing for this object, and then I'll show you about how I align these guys inside Cura. Pieces are all in here. So the roof is fine as is, because it can be printed straight up. The only part that would technically need support is this little door here, but it's so small, I'm not super worried about it. The two central towers, I want to turn them and lay them on their backs. So the detailed windows will be facing upwards. And then for the side, I'm going to lay them such that the insides are what's laying down. So all the ribs and things should be facing upwards. And now this way, because of how things are oriented, there should be no real need for supports. Because frankly, trying to clean supports out of these tiny little places here, like I said, unless you have like PVA dissolvable supports, is going to be basically a nightmare. And that's why we print these things up in several pieces, because it's a lot easier to assemble them together than it is to remove the supports. And then here's a final shot of the building fully assembled with a couple of the mechs from Battletech, a game of armored combat. So thank you guys all for watching. Once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. Go ahead and subscribe here, hit that like button, notifications, all that fun YouTube marketing stuff that drives everybody up at the wall, so you can make sure to get the latest notifications of the future projects I've got coming up here not too far off. So once again, thanks for watching and have a great week.